interviewing and hiring best practices. Beautiful. Can you go to the next screen? No? All right. Hello, my name is Cami Smith. I use she, her pronouns. I work in talent development and assessment here in the Lory Student Center.
I'm Esther Kemp. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the HR operations coordinator in the LSC HR office.
We've got a small group. Can you guys introduce yourselves as well?
Oh, I'm Fritz at the bookstore.
I'm Bennett from Environmental Services.
I'm Sean from Environmental Services.
I'm also Sean, I'm working here.
I'm not Sean, I work in IT, I'm Tom.
I'm Reid Soleimani, I work at Environmental Services.
Nice.
My name is B, pronouns they, them, and I'm the graduate assistant in the student leadership, involvement, and community engagement office.
And online, if you would want to throw into the chat what area you're with, that'd be great.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Oh.
So quick show of hands, how many of you have ever hired a student employee before? Well, congratulations, you are now part of this presentation. You are now officially a presenter. Congrats. If you have something worthwhile to say, please add. The more we share, the more we all benefit.
Yeah.
Okay, so at CSU, we use Handshake as our centralized location to find and post on-campus student positions. When you are making your Handshake job descriptions, you should be specific. There is definitely a difference between requiring previous experience and preferring previous experience. Not only does it matter for, wording, but it makes a difference in who applies. I might not apply because I don't think I have the experience when I indeed might. So changing your language from like required to preferred will open up your pool and potentially give you more applicants. If work study is a requirement as a condition of employment, you should say so. That way you don't have a bunch of non-work study students apply for your job or a bunch of work study students apply for a non-work study position. Pay is important. Make it easy to find. If there is potential for tips, you should list it. That's what students are looking for. They're looking for the pay. They're looking if there's any additional perks. If there is mandatory training in July, you should explicitly mention that in that job description so that if that's something you are expecting of your employees, people who are unable to make that work wouldn't even apply. This is also your chance to brag about your area. If there are perks like free food, this is where you list it. I'm a sucker for a free meal, so if that is something that you can offer in catering, then I would definitely brag about that in your job posting. This is your first introduction to the candidates, so you want it to be a good one. Does anybody else have any tips on Handshake or job postings? I will say Handshake is not the most user-friendly platform. That's all. It's just not the most user-friendly platform.
Yeah, basically, I know it's really important that key in what Career Center calls the proficiencies, like, digital proficiency, DP is part of, because I always put that as part of the, when there's a description of like a job duty, then I put that in there. It's really important to do.
Yep. And I'll talk about that later on here too.
The job is could be both work study and just student hourly. Do we still check work study? Because I don't want the students to think it's just work study.
Yeah.
Is there an option for both?
I think it's just you check it if it is work study, but I've seen people put it in the title. Like if it's work study specific, they'll put work study in all caps in the job title. But if you put in your job description like work study preferred but not required, that's a good way to make sure that you're getting both applicants. Okay, turn to the person next to you and tell them something you would highlight about your area if you were posting a job.
Hi there, so the bookstore is a very customer service oriented facility serving students.
Jamie. Yeah, Jamie. Harvey, what about you? What would you highlight about Slice?
I don't know how to word this, but maybe some type of like, this is involvement and work, like involvement opportunities and
I
work.
would say.
Engagement as a form of involvement type of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah. I feel like you could highlight
Also say, providing.
working in science will broaden your campus community and enhance your connection to campus.
I like that. We also have a comment from Jocelyn. Jocelyn's from the Office of Inclusive Excellence and says, we've started adding, please apply even if you don't meet all of the
Oh,
criteria.
I like that. I like that a
Since
lot.
women are less likely to apply if they don't have all of the requirements, it has some cons, but we've seen some pros as well.
I love that. Love that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jocelyn. I don't know if you can hear me, but appreciate it.
So anyway, it's just an review. You're welcome. Okay.
All right, we can go ahead and bring it back. Does anybody want to share? Fritz.
So, the bookstore serves faculty, staff, and students in providing educational materials to our community and anybody else who walks in the door, and focus on customer service.
Nice. We had someone online highlight that this is back to, preferred and required qualifications. They put in their job description, like, even if you do not meet all of these requirements, please still apply. And Jocelyn online mentioned that because historically, women will not apply for a job if they don't meet all of the qualifications, and men will typically apply for that even if they don't meet all of the qualifications. So just trying to bridge that gap. All right, so when reviewing applicants, it's important to be consistent across the board. So if you requested previous customer service experience and the applicant doesn't have it, then that is an X across the board for everyone who doesn't have that customer service experience. You need to rate all your applicants the same. If you're trying to fill a specific gap in a schedule from 3 to 6, then that exact availability is a necessity. Even if you love the candidate, if you are hiring for a specific time frame, that needs to be one of the filters through which you look through your applicants. If you're trying to find someone who can work 3 to 6, then that should be the first. You don't even look at other applicants who don't have that availability. And if you're constricted by your budget and only allowed to hire work study employees, check that they do have a work study award before you even schedule an interview. I've had success reaching out to all the applicants in a pool and being like, can you please confirm your work study status? And then they'll reach back out and be like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see this as a work study position. Like, never mind.
Yeah, something that I came across many years ago was, I had one person, and we were doing the trade book thing, and trade book could only afford work study. And I kept checking with the individual, are you work study, you work study, you work study? She said, yes, yes, yes. It turns out she didn't have work study. She was an international student, and she just thought of it as like, oh, I work and I study.
Oh,
She didn't understand the lingo.
Yeah.
And so that's something that's really important, particularly with international students, to bring up.
Very common for all students to not understand what work study is. And so, maybe even having a definition of work study could help.
So interviewing. Next, we'll talk just briefly about format, scheduling, questions. So will an interview be in person or virtual? There are pros and cons to each. Does anyone have any pros or cons to those that they'd like to share? I know I think virtual can be nice because scheduling wise, it's easier to fit in people's schedule. They don't have to get somewhere. You don't have to find a room to reserve. Like, everybody just takes it from their own space. So I have seen, virtual interviews be helpful that way. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, like, the virtual interviews, I think are really great for people who are out of state or out of Fort Collins, and it gives them an opportunity to work at CSU. Because let's say I'm interviewing them and they're in India or Pakistan, they can, we can offer them a job. Now, for people who are kind of in Fort Collins already, sometimes the drawback for a virtual interview is that, because in the past we've done group interviews, and so somebody would be on their phone and not paying attention. In person means they're there and paying attention.
True. Yep, very true. Another thing to consider is time. How long will the interview be? 25 minutes with 30-minute time slots. That gives you time to fill water bottles and run to the bathroom in between. I do think it's important to keep in mind the job that you're interviewing for. It doesn't make sense to have a 2-hour interview for a student position that's only gonna work an hour a week. You know, that's something you can think of. When you're considering questions, who questions are questions that tell you a lot about a candidate's personality and how they might succeed in a role. How they will work questions will help you see if they have any useful skills or experiences that show how they handle stressful situations. And then scenario questions, questions that relate to the department's values or the principles of community, DEIJ, those are all beneficial as well. So one more activity. Here are the principles of community. Can you come up with a question that establishes and asks about the importance of one of these principles of community? You can do it on your own. You can turn to the person next to you. Well, be quick. It'll be like 2 minutes. So you're making a question that establishes and asks about the importance of the principles of community.
Oh, okay. I get that question now. Let's see.
All right, I have one. Surprise. I think a question you could ask a student would be, how would you advocate for inclusion, integrity, and respect to a colleague who clearly doesn't see its importance? And that gives the applicant a chance to, you know, show their own personality and how they would handle a difficult situation. So then you're getting that difficult situation and the principles of community all kind of wrapped into one question. Okay, hiring. So you've selected your candidates that you want. What happens now? The first thing I would say is reach out to those unsuccessful candidates. The biggest thing that students complain about is that they never hear one way or the other. So reach out to those unsuccessful candidates. Encourage them to apply for your future positions. Tell them about other positions here in the Student Center. This is your chance to build a bridge that you might need later on with that student. Jamie.
I have 50 applicants, so I'm all by myself. So that's almost impossible for me to reach
Handshake
out.
have a,
Jamie.
like a,
Fritz.
Yeah,
Mail merge. That's what I use for lots of applicants.
I love that. I think that's very true, but feasibly, I think that's not always.
Are you saying that you did 50 interviews?
No, we did 50.
I would say you owe a call to the folks that you interviewed. I don't think that you
Okay.
you don't owe a contact to every single applicant that.
Yeah, if you
But I
could.
still get the students that applied and I haven't heard.
Yep.
Like, and I'm like, well, you didn't make it. That's
Yep.
fine.
It- Fritz.
Yeah.
That's where I use Handshake, because you can say decline, and you can create a form letter saying that they were declined because, you know, maybe they don't have the skills at this time or whatever the requirements are. But if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me, you know, about that. So you can use, that's what I do.
Fritz, I don't get into Handshake that often, but can you send that to multiple applicants then?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just check all their boxes next to their name and say like, message all applicants, and you can build up a template and it'll individually message each one.
Yep.
Okay, I'll play with it.
I can show you how, if you want.
We had a question,
Oh, yeah.
or a question that Jocelyn uses in interviews.
Oh, yeah.
That she wanted to share. It's, can you give me an example of the last time you had to overcome an uncomfortable situation and how you overcame it?
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for sharing.
Can we go back to the questions? I send my question beforehand.
Yeah.
I want to have like a real meaningful, you thought through these things.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be a standard. Do you
Some people do
recommend?
it.
Is that?
Yeah.
It depends.
I feel like
Some people-
there's a lot of like, I want to catch you in a stressful situation and gotcha. Okay. But that just adds to the stress that doesn't need to be there. But
Yep. I also think if you have any potential applicants that are neurodiverse, having those questions ahead of time can be beneficial for them because then they can really like process the question instead of getting put on the spot. I've seen it go both ways. I think sending the questions ahead of time is more common in like pro searches, like pro staff searches. I know RAM Events sent all their questions ahead of time with the interview request like here are the questions you'll be answering. And I think it does help get a more prepared interview.
I guess pros and cons to each. I don't know why you would wanna
I mean,
stress them out further.
cons would be that it's a scripted answer. You know, this isn't how they actually would work or how they would proceed. They had AI write it at home and now they're just reciting it to you. That I feel like would be a con. Pro, they're more prepared. I like asking questions on the spot because I want to see your nonverbals. I want to see some of like your body language and how you respond to a question. And you could send some questions like, hey, here's 3 of the 6 questions we're going to ask you, so that there's some, you know, amount of feeling prepared, and then you also get to still have your kind of spontaneity. Does that help?
Yes.
Do you want to do this one? You want me to do this
I got
one? Sweet.
Okay, so now it's my turn. Once the candidate is hired, the supervisor will provide them with a new hire form, which you guys all of you have one of those. And there it is up on the screen as well. So in order to do the background check, I must have a name, first name, last name, CSU ID, email address, and phone number. Those are crucial to get the background check started. The rest of the form is also very much necessary for me to get the supervisor information, and this on here that says, have you ever worked on any department at CSU in the last 12 months? If they have, they do not need to do a background check. This is the only form I need, and we can move on with start date that day. All right, so once the background check is initiated, I send out an email to both the supervisor and the employee right away, communicating next steps. So they'll be getting an email from HireRight, and as soon as the background check has cleared, they will also receive another email from Equifax, which includes the I-9, direct deposit, W-4, and some other related employment forms. I also send in that communication email a Calendly link, so that your new hires can make an appointment with me for the ID verification. I get a lot of questions about what are acceptable forms of ID, and they must bring a physical, original form of ID, not a copy, not a picture. I can't accept either of those. They can bring a List A document, which if they're a US citizen is a passport or passport card, and that is all I would need from a US citizen. Other forms of document A are permanent resident cards, employment authorization documents with a photograph, and if they're an international student, they will also need their foreign passport, the I-94, and an I-20 to show student status. If they do not have a List A document, they need a B and a C document. So that is typically driver's license along with a social security card or birth certificate. There are other forms that I'll accept. ID cards, if they have no other, like they don't have a driver's license, they don't have an ID card, we can do a student ID with a photo along with the birth certificate or social security card. So I typically just try to make it easy, say passport or photo ID, social security card, or birth certificate. Sean?
Under current circumstances, how long would you say, like from the moment I have a student fill this out and send them to you, how long before they're able to punch in and start working? Just as an estimate.
It really depends on a lot of things, because background check, I don't always know how long they take.
Sure.
There have been times where they take 2 weeks or longer. That's not the case right now. They're typically like a couple days. But then it depends on your student. How quick are they going to do that Equifax paperwork? How quick are they going to make an appointment with me and actually come in? As soon as that Equifax paperwork is done and I have IDs, I can enter their assignment. They can start that day.
Sure. So like best case scenario,
A week.
you could have somebody in, like
We could say a week.
hire them in like a week or
Yeah.
so, like be ready to work. Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's like it's varied over the years. I've been here so long. It's
Yeah.
varied. Like background checks used to take 5 weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
5 weeks.
I remember
So it's
that.
like we hired somebody and we're like, well, good luck. We'll see you,
Next month.
you know.
So
next month.
best case scenario, last summer, I had somebody bring me IDs and they were in the system that day. Background
I'm
check,
just curious.
background check was entered, I got IDs, the whole process happened in one day. That is pretty unrealistic and not,
Can I ask
doesn't
one more
happen very
Yeah.
often.
question? In terms of like best practice, off the street hiring. Like if I meet somebody and they have great availability and I've had a little conversation, I wanna hire that person outside of Handshake, do they then have to go through Handshake? Or can I just hand them this hire thing?
So due to
Or
the
is that a
equal,
non-best practice
Well,
practice?
due to
You
the
know,
Equal Pay, Equal Work Act, we have to have a job posting for every employee. That
Right.
said,
Sure.
your,
So if I have a posting up and I meet somebody, and
Yes.
I have to send them to that posting and do that process, is that it?
No, not necessarily. There are a lot of departments at CSU that will post the position on Handshake, but then they have like an external application.
yes,
So
they don't all have to go through online.
yeah, they don't have to go through Handshake necessarily, but if there isn't a job that they need a posting that relates to the job that you're hiring for.
Okay, because the reason I ask is because in catering, like, we can't just, like, sometimes we need help, we wanna hire, but we just can't have an ad up all the time.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We're not just gonna post an ad and then as soon as the ad goes down, post another ad, and as soon as the ad goes down, post another ad, just to give us the ability to hire
But
at all times.
Yeah,
So it's like if I do meet somebody and we're like, wow, you'd be great, and you have great availability, weekend availability, do I then have to go like create a job
so
posting?
you
in order to
typically
hire that
have a posting that you could put up, like,
person? Sure.
and we've been talking about creating standardized job posting, job
Descriptions, yeah.
Job descriptions, yeah.
Yeah.
That you could just pull from a folder and put in Handshake when you need one. So we have to have the number, like on this form, I will get, the assignment will be rejected in Oracle if I don't have a Handshake number, so that's like, we just have to have
It
that.
doesn't happen a lot. I'm not saying it's like something.
No,
that's
I
happening
understand your
ton.
question though,
I
yeah,
just feel like for our world specifically,
Mm-hmm.
because of the skills that are needed in kitchen and stuff, it's
Yeah.
like you meet people that you're like, oh,
Perfect.
bro,
yeah.
you for whatever reason are perfect for us, or you have a great schedule or whatever it is. And so I'm just curious about that process, if there's like a
I mean, we definitely can
grab
move
them out of
things.
the hallway.
I would say that's a conversation to have with LSC HR
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah,
It has to be posted for a day, right?
Yep.
Just a day.
I would recommend that people use handshake template features
Yeah.
to say, I'm offering you a job, would you like to accept it? I'm gonna be, and when you get the paperwork in, this is what we're doing next, you'll be getting information from LSC payroll. And so I just have different templates
Yep.
that I fire off to groups of people, because in the bookstore, we hire like 60 people at a time.
That is nice that Handshake does give you that option that they can have templates. Personally, I don't like messaging within Handshake. I find that people don't get the notifications that they have a message in Handshake. So what I personally like to do is pull their contact information off their resume, and then that's how I contact the candidate moving
I was
forward.
gonna actually ask that question
It's-
specifically,
it's-
is that okay?
it's
to reach
more-
out with your
yes.
original-
Yep, it's more effort, it's more work, but I mean, to get that information and pull it. But I have had better success keeping contact with a candidate that way.
Yeah, and for me, I had the opposite, because.
Really?
Yeah, because they would continue to message me in
Huh.
Handshake.
Hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
they,
That's crazy.
yeah, it really
Totally
is.
flipped experiences.
Yeah,
So back to the external, the
Oh, sorry.
non-handshake job, if you just meet somebody in the street, so you have a posting somewhere, you just, what do they do, send you a resume through to your email or what?
Well, so I think more like what Sean's talking about is, through with, catering and food service jobs, a lot of times you'll meet people like through events and stuff like that. Not necessarily that someone's actually like turning in a resume to you, but more like just having a conversation. Someone's like, man, I really need a job. I've got these knife skills and I'm free every Tuesday night. And then Sean being more like, hey, you might be a good fit for us.
So that if they don't have to apply through handshake, what do they do?
You just have to post it. They don't actually
Yeah.
have to apply for it on Handshake, but you have to have it
So they
posted.
can apply, just hand it to you or send an email.
Yeah. And
If that's how you want them
And
to
then you
do
would
it.
use that number for the paperwork. purposes. It's just, equal pay for equal work.
I know Slice has a really robust interview process for their an application process. So they'll post it on Handshake, and the post on Handshake says, you must apply externally at this site. And so that's how they get around that. So yes, it's posted, but they don't look at the postings there. So like if you apply on Handshake, I'm sure that they're like, well, you can't follow directions, so now we're not looking at this applicant. I don't know if they do that.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't know if I had anything else to add here.
I think that number 5 is super important. If you don't get an email from Esther saying that your employee is cleared to work, then they cannot work. They cannot be doing anything that could result in, anything. They can't work. That's the bottom line. If
we will get a violation.
It's against the law.
So, as soon as they do their paperwork and bring me IDs, I process them in Oracle, and I'll send an email to both you and the student letting you know that they're cleared to work. And then we also include a link for them to do the LSC employee orientation on those emails.
And then every couple weeks, I get a report from Stephanie, and I will also enroll them in that onboarding if they haven't
click on it.
if they haven't clicked on it already.
So I think that's it then.
Cool. During the time when you're waiting for a background check or paperwork, whatever, you're waiting for them to make their appointment, over communicate. Keep them informed of the process. If Esther says, hey, background checks are taking 2 weeks, communicate that with your applicant so that they don't leave and find another job in the meantime, or just assume because there's been no communication that there is no job.
And I will let you know that if I see that they're all of a sudden slow. Like I like to communicate with her and make sure you know.
Or if bookstore's doing rush hiring, Esther might know that like we've got 60 background checks in right now. So anyone else that needs background checks in, they might take a while. If you have an employee handbook or an online training module, this is a good time to get an employee started on that kind of stuff. Stuff that can be done, on their own time, asynchronously. Still track those hours, but that is stuff that they could do to start getting oriented to the job during that downtime. It's a good time to focus on the student employee's sense of purpose and belonging. You're already bringing them into the fold. Maybe their paperwork's not done yet, but you've added them to the group me of the department so that they can start, talking to colleagues and stuff like that. Advice. This is where, if you all have advice or we have extra advice, this is where we want to hear it. Or if you have questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
In the admin pro search module that we just had, it
Uh-huh.
came up that certain jobs for certain departments like automatically go out to like, jobs.com, LinkedIn kind of stuff, whatever, I don't remember specifics, but like, does Handshake ever recruit anything other than Handshake? And is there any path for us to recruit any other way than that? Like, is that just our only?
So Handshake is like university-wide, the centralized database that we use. I do know people will put signs up at their like locations all the time, or run an ad, saying that they're hiring.
The reason I asked personally
Yeah.
from catering is because as in past years, we put up ads and gotten a horrible response.
Yep.
And so I feel like for some reason, there's like kids want to work at the Ramscaler and they want to work here and there in dining services. And I feel like catering is one of those kind of quiet corners that kids don't realize that they might want to work in, And so like student employment is tough for us. I just was wondering if there's like another avenue, like, can we put this ad up and then recruit? I don't even know where. I don't have specifics as to where, but is there a path for recruiting elsewhere?
I think what catering should do is put ads up through housing and dining services.
Right.
Because then you've got a captive audience of a bunch of first-year students living in the dorms that see that ad.
And housing and dining obviously is using Handshake as well, right?
They are, but like just advertising on their LCD screens in their dining halls and in the dorms.
Sure.
Because then you're getting these freshmen, potentially a 4-year employee, and
Right.
yeah.
That's what I'd like to
Yes.
do and see, I just didn't know if there was like already something set up for that, like.
Not through Handshake, not for students. That the recruiting on a wider scale is definitely more for professional searches. Yeah. Yeah.
Jocelyn from the chat said it's also important to put questions in the chat box if you're doing a virtual interview.
Yeah.
So if you're on Teams, then they can actually have a time to read those questions.
Yeah.
As they're trying to answer them.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jocelyn.
So sometimes this has come up with some of my co-interviewers who identify as female. Sometimes we interview international students, and because some of them are from very male-dominant societies, and when they talk about, when we ask them about how they would tell their supervisor something, that there's something they disagree with, they always default, because of their culture, default to he, him. And so some of the female identifying interviewers find that off-putting and might not want to hire that person. And I've dissuaded them, no, people are from all sorts of cultures, and kind of have to learn what's here. But do you have any advice for something like that?
Well, I think just being aware that that is a thing. If you've never heard that some cultures are more masculine, then you might not even know that that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I think it's just being aware that there is always room for bias, and bias does happen, and doing your best, like you did, to say, hey, they're different cultures, they orient differently.
Yeah. And it's not good or bad, it's just what it is.
Well, it sounds like you did a good job educating your.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it possible to ask a screening question on Handshake?
Like what?
Are you available during these hours?
Yes.
Such and such a day?
Yes. So it doesn't screen out the applicant if they answer the way you don't want them to.
Like automatically, but.
Yeah, but yes, you can add questions through Handshake specifically that they have to answer. So you could say, do you have this availability? Check yes or no. And then when you're looking at the applications, you can just not look at the ones that said no. Does that answer your question?
It does, I wish I would have known that.
I knew it would have been hornswoggled.
Yeah, I can show you if you'd like. Anybody on the chat have anything they want to add or any questions? If not, Esther and I's contact information is up on the board. We would love to have a conversation with you about this kind of stuff. If you just want a sounding board to talk it out and bounce things off of, that's what we're here for. QR code, this is the assessment, so please assess us. Let us, yes, assess us. And thanks for coming, we really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for doing this, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.